Welcome to 4C Radio. We are broadcasting, as always, from the Christ University Central Campus, Bangalore. 4C Radio is brought to you by Department of Media Studies, Christ University, for all who are looking for a platform that focuses on communities, commons, climate, and communication. This is the place to be. What's more, this station is run by a diverse community of students and dedicated faculty members. In today's episode, Prachi speaks with environmental researcher, writer, and journalist Pankaj Sekhsaria. He takes us deep into the heart of the Great Nicobar Project, a massive 80,000 crore rupee plan that proposes a port and several commercial developments in one of India's most pristine, protected ecological sites. But this isn't just about environmental impact. Pankaj helps us unpack the very logic and cost of such a project: geological, ecological, social, and political. He also reflects on his decades long journey as a researcher and a journalist and why it's crucial for young people to stay committed to a subject, especially in these fast scrolling times. So, join in as we present Pankaj Sekhsaria in conversation with Prachi Pinglay.
Hi, Dr. Pankaj. Thank you very much for joining on 4C Radio today. We are very happy to have you. For listeners, Dr. Pankaj is an environmental researcher and an author and has authored several books on the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. We are very happy to have him in our studio to discuss his environmental journalism, writing, and whatever is happening on the islands at the moment. So, without spending more time on anything else, could you just tell us about what is this project really?
Hi, Prachi. Thanks for having me over. I'm very happy to be in this conversation. This massive project that's coming up in an island called Great Nicobar in the extreme south of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. It's a very large island of about 920 square kilometers. It's a pristine landscape with forest areas, with tribal communities, with a very rich coastline and extremely rich marine systems, which is probably one of the most pristine places from an environmental and ecological point of view in the country. And we have here a massive $10 billion project, something like 80,000 crores to be invested over the next 25-30 years in a set of projects that being promised as bringing development and bringing connectivity and things like that. And there are a lot of concerns about what this project will do. There are concerns on the environmental and ecological dimension because the project seeks to deforest 130 square kilometers of pristine tropical evergreen forest with species that are rare, that are even perhaps not discovered by science yet, species that are endemic, which means they are found only in that part of the globe and nowhere else. So I was saying there is this landscape which is extremely rich with species of unique characteristics, rare species. This island, the coastline and the forest are home to indigenous communities that have been around here on this island for thousands of years, who will lose access to their forests, who will probably suffer extremely because of the loss of land and things like that. This is also a very tectonically active zone where earthquakes happen on a regular basis. Earthquake of December 2004, which caused a massive tsunami of 2004, and one of the biggest earthquakes in human history happened very close to where this project is coming up. So there are many dimensions of concern where this investment is going to take place. Its impact on the indigenous people, its impact on the ecology, its impact from a security in terms of a risk perspective. So there's a fear that we will lose a tremendous amount of wealth and value for something that is not going to give the returns that it promises.
If I may ask you, often we think of infrastructure projects as sort of solving some problem somewhere, right? It may sound like a rhetorical question, but I'll still ask anyway. Why do we need this project? Who needs this project? And who will pay for it when it gets done?
One does not know who is going to actually be investing and who's actually going to be implementing this project in terms of the investments. So to the best of my knowledge, the project hasn't gone that far. So that's a very good question. Is it going to be a private entity? Is it going to be taxpayers' money? And that's a very important question for multiple reasons. That has not been answered and we don't have an understanding of that yet. What has happened where the project is concerned is all the paperwork has been cleared. The relevant clearances have been asked for and have been granted, and there are serious problems with those clearances. And we've been documenting that that and we've been speaking about that. So we don't know where the investment is going to come from. We don't know why somebody would want to invest in this. What is the expectation on returns? Whether the investments are going to give the returns that somebody would want for making the kind of investment they're going to make. The question of who wants it, why is it wanted, there is some rationale and some justification, say, by the government to say that there is an economic viability, there is a possible strategic implication. But if you look at the details of the project, and we perhaps don't have time to go into that, we have written a lot about that, we have documented that, one realizes that those claims don't stand to scrutiny. Will it really bring the economic benefit? Will it really actually be a strategic asset? It does not seem to be from the research that we have done. So there is this constant argument that this is important from a defense strategic aspect. And that is the cover under which a lot of information is denied, say even under the right to information. But when you look at the details of the project, there is a very small component in the project which is actually defense related. And that's only, say, 20% of the entire project, if at all, has a defense component. The rest is completely commercial. There's a commercial port that is proposed. There is, I mentioned, 130 square kilometers of a new township and a tourism project. Now, when somebody asked for details of the environmental clearance under the RTI, the information was denied, saying this is a strategic project. So how can a 130 square kilometer township and tourism project, how can a 40,000 crore port project that is entirely a commercial project be a defense strategic project, and you say that your national strategic interests will be violated if you provide information? So why I'm giving all this information is I don't understand what is the rationale and the logic of the project. And this is in addition to all the risks and the damage that it will cause any which way.
Of course, sometimes what happens is when we discuss numbers and we discuss area in terms of kilometers, it seems difficult to grasp. But I wanted to ask you about the photo that you showed in class today about the tracks on the beach, right? Mm-hmm. Where this port is likely to come. So could you tell us a little bit about the tractor tracks on the beach?
So there is this picture of what looks like a tractor might have driven on the beach in a bay and in a beach known as the Galathea Bay, which used to be a wildlife sanctuary. There is an extremely beautiful white sand beach there, maybe about 2 kilometers in length or little less, on which unique, very amazing creature known as a giant leatherback comes to nest. The giant leatherback is a creature of the sea. It is one of 7 species of sea turtles that we find in the oceans of the planet. And it is the largest of the 7 species of sea turtles. It can grow up to 600 kilograms in weight, can grow up to 6 feet in length. And for a creature that spends its entire life in the ocean, sea turtles have to come to land, to the beaches to lay their eggs. Now, it is an amazing creature because it nests, for example, in this case, we have some scientific evidence that it nests on the beaches in the Andaman and Nicobar, and then they have been tracked by satellite to swim as far as Australia and Africa, which is 10,000 and 12,000 kilometers from where they are found in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So, on the one hand, one sees that these are creatures that connect the planet, because the giant leatherback in particular has been on the planet since the time of the dinosaurs. So, it's really an ancient creature. It is coming to these coasts, and the Nicobar Islands are among the most important nesting sites of the leatherback in the entire northern Indian Ocean. Actually, there are no other nesting sites except for the Andaman and Nicobar, and maybe 1 or 2 sites in Sri Lanka. But this part of the ocean of the world, there's no nesting of the giant leatherback. And the site where the port is going to be built in a very seismically active zone, that's one issue, is also the site of where these turtles nest. And among the Nicobars, one of the most important nesting sites. One just wonders as to what for and what happens to the rights of these creatures in that sense, what happens to their long-term survival, and what is going to be the benefit. Even if one said there is benefit, there does not seem to be any benefit for the loss that will actually happen.
I hate to bring this argument to the conversation, but it's always there for each one of us to answer, is this whole development versus environment thing that gets peddled. And we always have to sort of explain that development at the cost of environment is no development at all, right? Yeah. However, when you see this kind of fragile but very, very precious either ecosystems, or I don't know how to explain it, how the whole island could change because of that. The loss of this compared to the development that comes, and to take this issue outside of it and talk about what is happening in the world for the past few years. I mean, whether we talk about environmental degradation, destruction, climate change, if we want to bring it into the conversation, given how every island is affected by the sea level increase and all that. How would you describe it as a communicator, given what is going on there, because the argument in the media or outside of it is always tilted in favor of economic growth, the numbers that people talk about, the pictures that come on these reports which are given to us, what it will look like. So if you could articulate how you feel about it,
Sure.
and how do we explain this loss really?
Yeah. So as a matter of fact, yesterday I was making another presentation and this question came up, and it strikes me when we ask of this environment and development question, I'm just thinking we are sitting in Bangalore and I come up with a project, say in Bangalore, of 15-20,000 crores of economic benefit, and I say I will fill up all the lakes of Bangalore and I will convert this to real estate and I'll convert this into IT parks and whatever. Will it be acceptable to a Bangalorean? And I don't know. I mean, this is a question. I'm assuming it will not be. Whatever the economic value I offer to a Bangalore citizen, I feel intuitively that given the state of the city, given the state of what our experiences are, the lakes of Bangalore are a huge asset for so many reasons. Maybe for recreation. I could be wrong. My sense is today's Bangalorean is very proud of the lakes and they want the lakes. Is a person of the city willing to sacrifice and fill up those lakes for the economic benefit? Because it will give economic benefit. It's huge land that is under these lakes. So you fill them up and you make buildings and you sell them. Somebody's going to make a lot of money. You can have amusement parks. You can have what you want. Will that be acceptable? And if it is not acceptable, then what happens to other places where there might be not lakes, but there might be other things? Slightly, I'm coming to the specific question you asked, but if we internalize that from our own context, and if there's a person in Bangalore who says, okay, I'm okay with my lakes being filled up for real estate, then I am with this person to say, okay, destroy the Nicobars for that particular project. But if I say, no, I want my Bangalore lakes because I know what Bangalore is today and I want a clean city and I want fresh water and I want recreation and I want birds and I want a wholesome life, then that's true of any other place. And oxygen, yes. Yeah. Otherwise, we know what's happening in cities. Whereas a communicator, I can think, Prachi, I think that one of the things is, actually very basic in journalism or communication is to tell parts of the story, which perhaps have been either deliberately or even unknowingly not been uncovered or not been told. So yes, there is this project or there is this issue and there is a side to it, which might be the developer side, might be the government side, might be the local person side. That's fine. But is there a dimension to the story or the issue that also needs to be told? And in this case of, say, the Nicobar project or even otherwise, I do feel that sometimes we could simply do the basic job of communicate. And this is basic but also not simple because we need to do our research. We have to get the facts out, facts that might either not be easily available or facts that we have missed or issues that we have not thought about as important. So who are the various players involved? Maybe there is a small community somewhere who we don't know anything about that is linked, whether it's the lakes of Bangalore or the forests of Bombay or the islands of the Andaman and Nicobar. In the larger story, there might be 10, 15 players. Maybe this is the 17th player whose story has not been told at all. Maybe there isn't, but maybe there is. Maybe they have a say. Maybe they have a point of view. So how can we bring in even more information, good research, well documented, because it's there. Information, perspective. The information might be there, but is everybody heard? The hearing could be on the side of supporting something or raising concern. And I think if I look at, say, what we have done with this Nicobar project that we speak about, our main job, or what we've done over the last 3 years, is to generate more and more and more of this information. There is a report on the project. There is an EI report. What is in the EI report? What was the process that was followed? Yes, clearance was granted. But how was the clearance granted? How many meetings were held? What do the minutes of those meetings say? Are there contradictions? So I think that the deeper we dig, more meticulously we dig, in some senses, facts will tell the truth. And I think if you go by that dictum, although it's not so straightforward as well, but that at the basic level will do the work that you want to do. Because finally, as a communicator, I'm not a decision maker. I can influence decision and I might at some point be in a decision-making position. But today I'm not. What I have with me as a communicator, as a journalist, as a researcher are these tools and these opportunities. And I have to do justice to them. So how do I get information? How do I get perspective? And then how do I share it with the public out there? And I think that's how I would look at the job of the communicator. It could be a difficult subject, but if we are focused in the classical sense on what the matter is, on what the truth is, we have huge number of platforms today, much more than in an earlier time for communication.
In fact, when you're discussing this or when you're talking about this, I was thinking about all the years that you have spent on the islands, right? I mean, we first met 20 years ago, and that time we were just about grappling with what the tsunami had done, you know, and what should be the rehabilitation process and how should that go. And, nobody ever talked about this kind of development at that time. And you have been there since then or even before that and until now. You have written a novel about it. You have written a book about it. You have brought out this edited volume about the project. One, how do you see changes in communication and what has been happening on the islands itself, right? How has that changed you as a person? Like, how have you changed as a researcher or journalist, or just, how does it affect you?
So I was saying, one is, do we need this kind of infrastructure when we talk about that specificity of that island system, and that kind of infrastructure in such a seismically volatile zone, is it needed? The other thing is, how much do the local community, local people know about this island system itself? So for instance, in an island system surrounded completely by sea, why don't we have a much better shipping system in these islands? An island administration not worried about shipping is of great concern. And what development can you have? You can't have roads, you can't be flying around, it's not easy. Shipping is most reliable, it's safest, it's well established. But there's a mindset which probably, we've spoken about this in different contexts earlier, is about a very mainland-centric, Delhi-centric kind of a attitude and approach that doesn't understand the coast and the sea. That's something that's very important to keep in mind. And what is the education that is probably available to people in those islands? What is the information available? How much do they know about giant leatherback turtles? How much do they know about the ocean, about life in the ocean? There's so much more that can be done over there. So going back to the question is that, and the point is, we need to calibrate and create material, even as communicators, as journalists, that of course tells people about the world, but also about things that are not found else in the world. Why can't there be stories around, more stories, as much about the tiger and the polar bear as the whale and the dolphin and the turtle? So that's how people will also connect to that place. So there are many of these kind of gaps that one sees, and one of course wants to intervene when one looks at something in the sense of, a project is there, or I feel it's not right. But if you create a larger background, context, content, and an understanding of what that place is, because that place is not a Delhi or a Bombay or a Bangalore. True. It is what it is, and it has to be understood for that.
When you talk about stories, and especially given the islands, it has so much of unique species, flora, fauna, however you want to categorize it, which are very important, not just from an India point of view, but from a global point of view. What kind of response have you seen to this project or to the larger idea of conservation of these islands from global community?
I think in a world that is so much content and grabbing attention, I think that's going to be a constant struggle. Again, it can only start with if you have the basic research and the information and the documentation done, which we've been doing for the last 3-4 years. Linked to that, and second to that, would be then how to communicate this. I think the more we are able to communicate, the more we are able to reach out, probably different sets of people will respond to the whole thing. Because when the information and knowledge itself is not there, how will a response ever be there? So that has not come. There has been some concern and response on the indigenous people side, in the sense of international organizations have expressed concern, including writing to the President of India and authorities saying that this project is not at all in the interest of the indigenous communities. Other thing, there has been some interest, say, with certain biodiversity species, like these migratory species like the giant leatherback turtle. But no, there hasn't been as much as there might be need to, because Great Nicobar is also UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. It's a globally recognized global asset in that sense. And when we are talking today about climate change, we are talking about the capacity of forests to be sinks, when we are talking of conservation in such a big way, then we can't look at it, like you said, just as an Indian asset or an Indian ownership. There are much larger concerns, because also these affect each other. I mean, turtles are going to be very badly affected, whether you destroy the nesting habitat in the Andaman and Nicobar, or you destroy or you pollute the sea somewhere else. So I think that larger understanding and connection is required, is desirable, and we have to try, we have to keep trying, and we just hope that more people get involved. So it's also a function of how many more people are involved, how much communication we are able to do, how much research is happening. So in some senses, I think it's also a function of a quantity of work. So we've done this book called The Great Nicobar Betrayal, which has reached out quite widely. I'm working on a second compilation of that. In the last 1 year, what writing has happened. We've done language versions of that book, one in Bengali, one in Hindi, We are working on a Tamil translation. So these are little efforts on our part to tell that story as widely as possible. So this is what is needed. Could be social media campaigns, could be more journalism, could be journalism in English, could be journalism in the non-English media. So many things can actually be done.
And if I were to look completely inwards and go hyper-local, what has been the response of indigenous communities and also local people, as we call them, settlers? I don't know if it is the right word to use.
They are called settlers.
They're called settlers. What has been the response from these two sections of population?
I think that's a very good question, and it's a very important question. So my understanding is that the settler community, which has come to the islands from outside, from mainland India in the last 40, 50 years, by and large is desirous of these kinds of projects from the outside, of infrastructure, because they look at it as giving them economic opportunity of development of infrastructure. Part of it is in response to the fact that things are not so good in these islands in terms of infrastructure and things like that. If you don't have good medical facilities, if you don't have good mobility, good connectivity, there's nothing wrong in expecting all of that. They should get it. We are bound to give it to them as a country and a society. When they don't get it and then they see these, that's my interpretation, they look at these projects as opportunities for getting some of that. My problem and my concern is that this is the same administration and the same system that does not think that shipping is important for the island system. So when an administration is not oriented to thinking like that, then one might argue that these large projects of the kind are also not meant for the local people. They might be collateral beneficiaries. Some parts of it, of course, there will be so much money comes, if infrastructure comes, people will benefit. But if what people really require is what we look at, then you don't require so much investment. You just require maybe better shipping, maybe better air connectivity, better internet connectivity, basic hospital facilities.
Yeah, you don't need an 80,000 crore project to improve these things on
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that being the case, yes, local people are looking forward to this. In Great Nicobar particularly, is a very small population of 3,000-4,000 people who are settlers, who are not happy with the kind of position that a lot of us have taken. They are seeing our position as an impediment in the development. I think it's a fair position. But I think if we engage with them more and if they understand the concerns that we have raised, because these are also concerns that will have an impact on the local people with the earthquakes and the tsunamis and all kinds of things that are very specific to that landscape. But as of now, yes, they are in support of the project. They look at us as impediments to development, and I appreciate that position. And there should be that negotiation. I think they should have the right to say what they have to say. Where the indigenous peoples are concerned, it's a little more complicated. The Shompen community is pretty much out of the conversation because we don't have access to them. We don't know their language. They live in deep forests. So we don't really know what they want. They probably don't know what's coming their way. Although there is some records recently done by anthropologists when some of them who come out of the forest and speak a basic Hindi have very clearly said, you don't come into the forest. You please stay by the coastline. They sense something. They have a fear. Are we going to listen to that? Do we think it's an important statement to make? I think is an important thing. The other tribal community, which is known as the Nicobaris, they first issued a no objection certificate of the project. They said we are okay with the project. But very soon, and we have documented this in our book and it's available in the public domain, they withdraw their no objection because they realize that they don't have full information and what the project does is not necessarily in the interest as they understand. So they are looking, from what I understand, I'm not in direct contact with any of them, but from what they have said and what colleagues who speak to them say, they are not fully opposed in that sense, but they also want it in the way that they want it, so to say, development. It's a complicated story because the Nicobari community that is today in administrative headquarters was spread all over the coast of the island. They were badly hit when the tsunami came. Many hundreds of them died. The people who survived were brought to a settlement in Campbell Bay. It's a little bit like a shanty town. And they've been there for 20 years.
It's a relief camp that has never been dismantled.
Exactly. They want to go back to their old lands.
They haven't gone back to their homes.
They're not being allowed to go back because of various reasons. And I'm guessing administration thinks it's going to be difficult logistically, cost-wise. So for them, it's convenient. But people are not happy. They're not able to lead the lives that they've been leading. There are impacts on their health, on their mental health, on their cultural practices. They can't do plantations. They can't keep pigs. That's all part of their culture.
Especially the houses that were on the stilts.
On the stilts,
right?
Exactly. It is a system that's quite integrated into the context. Now, what's also we are realizing and they are realizing is that some of their old settlements are part of the project land. So if they go back there, then there is a problem for the project. So they will not let them go back. So that is their position. They want to go back. They're not saying no to the project, but they're also saying we want to go back to our lands. I think which is a very fair claim. This is a community internally displaced now for 20 years. If they have to go back, they should go back. They have the right to go back, and they're willing to go back, and they want to go back. And I think there is a concern in the older generation that they will lose all those skills. They will lose that understanding. Already one can see loss of knowledge, and that is linked to place. It's linked to the daily life and experience. Maybe language. You lose understanding of objects, plants, if you're not in that place. So there are many implications. So that's where the dynamics of the local community and all that is concerned.
Right. If I could sort of bring you to the point that you made earlier about being at this tri-junction, where we need to understand geological, ecological implications of what we do and socio-cultural implications of what we do. So I think what you mentioned just now is exactly all that, right? So could you explain what you meant by that and why it is so crucial to understand the geological implication also?
This is something that I've been thinking and working. It's like I'm trying to argue for a conceptual framework to understand many of these things. And this emerges from looking at the islands and the point that I made to you earlier that from troubled islands, I'm now looking at this as islands in flux. And this is primarily the premise that there is constant change. And if one tries and understands the system either from a temporal kind of context, so like I was saying, there's a geological dimension based on which there's an ecological dimension in terms of life, and the socio-cultural context of how human beings and human societies live is very deeply influenced by the geological and the ecological. So what we eat or what our forefathers ate, where they were based, whether it was the Rajasthan or it was the coastline or it was the Himalayas, what people grew, what people ate and how people dressed, how they made their houses, was all decided and influenced by the geological dimension of what stone materials are available, what is the climatic conditions, and by the ecological context. What will grow there? What will not grow there? It's a very obvious, a little deterministic kind of an approach. But we have to understand this. The other thing I was also saying, I realized that if one looks at the current moment, then one, as an analogy, one might look at the tripod as the ecological, the geological, and the socio-cultural all intersecting and coming together at the point where the balance has to be maintained. And the disturbance of any one leg of a tripod means the entire tripod collapses. That's probably a more productive analogy today to say that the geology influences ecology, influences socio-cultural practices, and what we do in turn influences. So ecological damage is an impact of, say, human activity. The coming of the Anthropocene or climate change is also an impact of the human society on geology and on the ecology. And I do feel that we have not accounted enough for the geological changes that we have made. And the Anthropocene kind of really puts that right in front of us. What the Anthropocene is saying is that the human being over the last so many years has become one of the most important and powerful forces of change in the Earth systems. And we are now probably entering a new geological era. And that is driven by human intervention. It is also the fact that this is a geological intervention. If you look at what's happening, say, in the Himalayas, why do we have flash floods? Why do we have landslides? Because we are making interventions, if I might use the analogy, altering and impacting the basic structure of that. It's like, weakening the column of a building. So it may not collapse today. At some point when the column collapses, that's when the whole mountainside is falling into the river. That's when the glacial lake outburst is washing away a dam.
And because we've done it over a period of time, we are sort of not recognizing it as something that we are doing it actively.
Probably.
Every day we chip little by little on a mountain and we think that this much is okay, but in the end we've taken out the whole mountain.
Yeah, and then sometimes that whole mountain also collapses.
Yeah.
It's like a cumulative thing at some point of time. Correct. So similarly, in the case of, say, the Andaman and Nicobar, there the geology is a very seismically active geology. So what is the kind of construction you should do? What is the kind of development that you want? I was mentioning in class, for example, when Telangana was created, I still remember the first Chief Minister of Telangana in his pitch to draw international investment to Telangana said, invest here and your investment is safe because this area does not experience earthquakes. So he was making a pitch to say that your investment is secure because at least that risk is not there.
Correct.
And I think that's a very interesting point. So if you acknowledge the risks and now compare this to a landscape like the Andaman and Nicobar or even the Himalayas for that matter, which is seismic zone 5, you have one earthquake a week on an average in the Andaman and Nicobar. You have earthquakes that are 8 and 9 on the Richter scale. Is it the right kind of investment to make there? Risk to investment, risk to life. So I think this, how can we moderate our belief in technological intervention, which is a very powerful means of intervention. That's our power because we have that capacity. But what happens when there's a disaster? Can we anticipate everything? Do we know exactly what's going to happen when? So I think that is where the concern should be, and it might help to be a little conservative there.
Yeah. You have been, I'll come to the end of this conversation soon. But one thing I wanted to ask you was, you have been talking about this, or rather writing about this, in many ways. One is articles, one is research, the other is novel, edited volumes, children's book. Tell me, from completely you as a writer, how do you decide on the format? How do you decide to tell a story? What is your way of working? What inspires you when you decide to tell a story in a certain way?
That could be a long answer. I need to think about it. But what I realized,
because you've actually done all these
things.
forms,
Yeah.
right? So
I think one I would say is that I enjoy writing. I enjoy the process of writing because it's a kind of cliche that we say stories find writers don't find stories, and I think that is some senses it's very true. So of course there is a why I'm saying that is because that's how one is able to do it. I think I'm thinking is that I like to write. Of course there is an output in mind, and different kinds of writings require different kinds of processes and different time frames but there are moments in writing when you are so absorbed and enjoying the process that really trumps everything. And it's like wanting to get into a zone where it's a conversation actually you're having with yourself. It's a conversation with the word. Ideas often I think it would probably be true of many people who write. You start off writing with something with an idea in mind, and what you end up with is completely different, even with that process of writing. And it almost mines into your subconscious, and ideas and analogies and stories and words emerge, and narratives change. So I think I don't know about others, but when I get into that's why I like writing.
Zone.
There's a zone, and I like writing. And then, of course, one has to calibrate for different kinds of forms of writing. And I've tried that. I mean, I would like to write more fiction, but then there is the limitation of one's own capacity. I don't know how good I am as a fiction writer, but there's also the mind space you require, the physical time you require to be able to do that. So within that, one is, I think this is more for me, increasingly I feel it is a joy of engaging with the writing process and the written word. So a day when I'm able to spend an hour or two, I do all my writing on the computer. I don't do pen and paper. That day feels good. Even if they may not have been a great output, but there is a sense that something has happened. So that would be one part of how I understand what it is. The other has been at different levels is also to consciously test my capability as a writer. I can do good journalism. Can I also be a novelist? Can I also write academic work? And that's like a little bit of a
Self-motivated
or say the ego of the writer. To say that I want to try and write.
Ye bhi karna hai.
Ye bhi karna hai, wo bhi karna hai. And I think the challenge there.
Also, some stories might require a certain form, right? Like you don't want to put the Great Nicobar betrayal in any other format. You want to have it as that.
For now, yes. But
yes.
it could be the same story could be written differently. Right. It could be a poem. It could be dramatized.
Yeah.
It could be a children's story. So I think each story can be narrated in a different form. The essence could remain the same. So I think that is one thing that is something that is I would like to try and do, because you also reach different audiences.
Correct. Is there any story which you have in story or experience or anecdote, anything that has not found its way into any of the publications?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I think this is a very...
Tell us one.
This is a very limited... I'm not sure if I'm able to think of anything, but across so much work that has been done, I think the experience of our lives are so much larger. Every moment can be a story in that sense. So I haven't thought of it that way, but I've been on a completely different tack. I've been doing some work on in the sociology of technology. I don't know if you have the time to go down that route, but that's a PhD work I did where I'm studying scientists and technologists as a sociologist. So as an anthropologist,
They let you do that?
yes, they do actually. It's a well-established discipline. There is a small community now in India. I did a PhD in that, studying Indian nanoscientists and nanotechnologists, and I've written about it. So it's not directly an answer to your question, but what is the life of a scientist? What happens inside a laboratory? What are the various dynamics that make science happen? So there are many questions of that kind. And that again can be a completely different discussion and a presentation or a conversation or whatever. But great possibilities there in studying scientists. Even if we have how many hundreds of thousands of scientists. So anybody who's willing to be spoken to understand their work. There are. That could be a very interesting area of work. So on a related, though not looking at science, I've been working on a project last 4-5 years with students to document these informal automobiles in India. It's actually amazing what a big universe of automobiles not made by the corporate world, not made by the Tatas and Mahindras exists. And these are, there might be problems with that, with the legality and all that, but there are thousands of vehicles that are running all over, even probably in a Bangalore. Now, we might have our position on that to say that...
like Tum Rickshaw or something like that.
Which are not technically legal. They're not authorized vehicles.
Okay.
They are made by people in roadside workshops.
Wow.
Now, we might have our positions and concern safety, security, legality, all that. But the question for me is, with all that, how and why are these automobiles there? Why are they made? What are the gaps that these are filling? How do they make these automobiles? Who's making them? Who's buying them? What are they used for? So there's a whole universe. Exactly. Yeah. There's a whole universe around that, which is kind of under the radar, is a informal world. There's so much skill there. Imagine, which we saw, a 20-year-old boy is making full automobiles that are sold at 3 lakh rupees in the market. Who are these guys? Where are they learning their skills from? There might be issues.
Engineering.
There might be issues. There might be safety issues. One is not denying that. Right. But it's not to say that, corporate-made cars don't have issues. So, one is to sit in judgment straight away. We still can. But to try and understand that universe. Where do they get the materials from? What is the design? Is there some design? Is there a drawing? Where did they learn the skills from? How much do they make as an individual? What are the other options that they have? So, I think, again, some of it has been written about, but it is just full and full. It's quite amazing actually. Recently, me and my students, we presented a paper in a conference in Guwahati. And it's quite fascinating for everybody who listens. There's a full presentation that we have and information that we have. And such amazing stories of these automobiles. So I'll just give you one example. So there's where I was doing, one of the case studies is in part of Bengal. So they make these automobiles, I have pictures and all. In some parts of the story is, in some parts it is called the Vano. Because once upon a time a former chief minister of Bengal did not allow Tatas to come to Bengal and make the Nano. So they said, we will make our own Vano. So they make these automobiles which perform something else. They are running on water pumps. They are running with engines of a Tata 407 or an Ambassador, which are second-hand engines brought from the second-hand from workshops in Calcutta. There's a whole network of material flowing, and they're selling them for 50,000 to 2 lakh rupees. They're non-geared vehicles. There are 4-geared vehicles. Some vehicles have a motorcycle handlebar. Some vehicles have a car steering. All kinds of interesting things. And these objects are live objects running around. Local municipalities and village panchayats have given them registration numbers, because they are performing, they're obviously useful to people. Right. They don't have a RTO registration, but they have a village panchayat registration.
Wow.
So it's such an interesting universe that we know nothing about. And so they call
necessity is the mother of invention.
And so many things to be understood. Material flow, skill sets, law, social context. What is it feeding? How does it compare to the corporate market? What does it do? How is it beneficial?
How does it work?
So many things, so much of recycling of material. We talk of a circular economy, but these are very deeply embedded circular economy systems where so much material is coming back into recycling rather than being dumped or scrapped or whatever. So it's a whole universe out there that I think the world of research and communication is probably not capturing on to be discovered. We are too caught up with a certain set of ideas and things and concerns, which are all very important. But I think it's a fascinating world out there as communicators, because you can't be a good communicator if you're not a good researcher. And you can imagine what a story it would be to be able to figure out what these vehicles are and what is their uses or what are their problems.
Did you take a ride in one of them?
Yeah. So these are, I mean, it's no big deal.
I'm imagining it as a tum-tum auto rickshaw where
I can show you pictures,
6-8 people sit and...
That also, yeah. I'll show you pictures,
What was it called in Maharashtra? Dukkar rickshaw. Have you
No, but I heard of it, but I've not seen it. Yeah. Okay.
Wow, fascinating.
So there are many stories in that sense to be told. Yes. I mean, it's full of stories to be told.
Correct.
What has been captured is just a kind of scratch in the experience of our lives. I am at least writing, imagining everybody else. Everybody has a story. Everybody has experiences.
Right.
It's just that not all of us, all of us don't have to tell stories.
The proverbial tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there anything, I mean, I know this was a complete deviation from our earlier conversation, but is there anything that you want to share, especially for younger communicators or aspiring journalists or our students, who want to make a meaningful sort of change, or they want to do something about things, and yet it is a tough world out there, so how would you address them in terms of how can one do it, what can one do, and why one should keep doing it?
So I can only speak from my limited experience, and also I think the challenges and the world today is very different from the world that it's constantly changing, back to the change thing. But I feel that certainly in the world of communication and research, I think to stick to one or two ideas and hold that as a thread of research, interest, communication is very important for multiple reasons. So, like I was saying earlier today, I think I can tell a story of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands because I've been engaged with that place for 25-30 years. I have just for the simple reason that I have that long in experience. 20 years ago, I could not come and tell the story. Nobody would call me. Today, just for the sheer reason of putting brick on brick, just how a wall is made. Wall is starting from the bottom and it cannot be made at one go. You have to lay it brick by brick. You have to lay the first brick on which the second brick will come. And the first brick is not going to mean anything. But unless you lay that first brick, that wall is not happening 2 years or 20 years down the line. So I think to hold to one or two threads of interest to you, could be geographical, like in my case, it's the islands, or could be about a theme, or could be about something that inspires you, but to be with it. Because we lose interest and we divert very quickly. And that is the moment when we should actually hang on. It's the last mile, the last 20%. You've done all the hard work. It is that last 20%, that tedious bit of that last staying on, that boring part, that often makes the difference. And it is when one stays with it, engages with whatever the issue might be, is I think when we build our own understanding, we build our own story, and we build our own credibility and reputation. So would you rather listen to somebody on the islands or on Bangalore or this university who has come yesterday? Or you will listen to somebody who knows this place for 20 years, whose story would be more interesting from a particular perspective. The newcomer story is also very interesting. But to be able to have that credibility, so that is what I think is very important.
That depth or that gravitas.
And that will come with the engagement.
Insight,
That will come... You have to stay with it. I mean, again, that's the... Don't have to be very aggressively, but stay with it. Let it be. You be with it. And keep doing something about it. There could be different ways you can engage. Yes, sometimes it can be boring. But
no, it's very true because, so we started writing about the farmer suicides long ago in 2000, I think I started writing about it in 2007-8. And every year it would be similar stories that we would do again and again and again. Slowly I started connecting that with unseasonal rains. Slowly I started connecting it with because in journalism somebody else covers something, you cover something, like almost always you're working sort of in a little bit of a disconnected way. But I was very happy when I thought of interviewing a weather and a climate scientist. And he said long ago that get ready for more droughts. And that was our headline at one point. And it hadn't come from an agricultural expert or, and the fact that I was able to make that connection, and then, and that only happened because I had covered so many unseasonal rain stories over a period of time, again and again and again. And then I was like, no, maybe I should talk to someone else outside of this to get it. And he was so eager. He was like, yeah, I mean, like,
I have something to say.
Yeah, I have something to say about this, and it was, and I think that's what you mean, when you say that you stay with a story and then you stay with an issue or a subject. And
correct. I think it's an excellent example because you've, as a person beginning to report on that, you would do the obvious people.
Yeah.
You would do the farmer, you would do the agricultural person,
Correct.
you would do the politician.
Correct.
Is when in some senses you've exhausted that source. What else can you bring to the table?
Because you keep thinking, no, something else is happening here,
Exactly. Exactly. But for that, you have to exhausted all the other possibilities for you to start thinking. And that cannot happen unless you are, I think, engaged and you've done all of that.
Yeah.
Only then can you think of a new angle. So I think it's a very interesting example, that a very good example of what.
I mean, I can connect it to what you're saying. So, but yeah, thank you very much. This was wonderful. Please keep coming and keep talking to our students. And I'm hoping that we do more work together.
Absolutely. Thanks, Prachi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was Pankaj Sekhsaria reminding us that thoughtful research and long-term engagement aren't just academic values, they act, and they are, acts of resistance in a world rushing to build, often at the cost of what is irreplaceable. This interview was recorded at the Media Hub, Christ University Central Campus, Bangalore. If this episode made you pause, question, or reflect, share it and start a conversation. This episode was edited by Srinivas Aditya, illustrated by Vernika Singh. Please write to us and follow 4C Radio on Instagram and X. Until next time, be curious and ask questions. 4C Radio is an initiative by the Department of Media Studies, Christ University, Bangalore.